So good morning and welcome. My name is Philippa Haynes.
And I'm Mark Lee. Welcome to another review session of the Accountant's Success Secrets podcast.
And normally we're interviewing a guest, an accountant who is doing great things, has years of experience, and whose story can inspire and encourage other accountants around the UK.
And normally I'm working from home, my home office, and I don't have any extraneous noises. But today I had a couple of clients who wanted to meet face-to-face for mentoring sessions later today. And I've gone to the Institute of Chartered Accountants where I'm based. So I have to speak a little quieter. And I apologise if there's any extraneous noises that you can hear in the background. And I hope desperately that nobody asks me to shut up, so I can only speak conversational levels. It just occurs to me.
Never mind.
Our aim, of course, I was just going to say, our aim is to provide, regardless of the inconvenience to me. I didn't want to let down our loyal listener, so thank you for being there, or Philippa, when I realised the clash. We'll see how it goes. I'll try and use the mute button as far as I can to ensure that we still provide fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener, within around 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, and a call out to James, who's watching this or listening to this on the train, and I hope I'm not buffering too much, but hey, technology. So today we have reached our review stage where we actually pause and really reflect on some of the insights that we've heard from our previous podcast guests, and actually the 5 most recent.
Indeed. So it's just us today, and this is our third review podcast. And we start with Glenn Martin. It seems like ages ago we talked to Glenn. He initially trained with a local accounting firm before moving on to a number of CFO roles, and then in 2016, returning to practice and supporting small businesses by launching Avery Martin Accountants. Now, what do you remember specifically about our conversation with Glenn, Philippa?
Well, just going back to, I was made aware of Glenn during the sort of COVID period, and obviously we don't want to dwell on that, but that's where I noticed him. He was doing so much for his clients. He was live, he was doing webinars, I think he was doing Facebook groups, and the thing that really marked him out for me was just how dedicated he was, how direct and honest he was about his business and some of the struggles that he had and also his clients were having. And I guess since we spoke to him, one of the things he said coming out of that period was just looking at his client base and being able to recognize who was the priority and who really needed that attention and that relationship and that value, and actually who was actually okay on their own. And he got it wrong, he said. So he was being really honest and candid and said he'd focused on the smaller businesses who he thought would need a lot of help and left his larger, more valuable clients to kind of work it through themselves. And he said that was a big mistake because, in fact, those larger clients had bigger problems. They had more issues with their team, their people, and their clients. And actually his time was sucked up with those smaller businesses where, obviously there was a crisis as well, but not on the same scale. So as a result of that, he has redressed the balance and really started to think about who his ideal client is and who he really should be focusing on in terms of serving. So that was my core takeout, I think, Mark. How about you?
Well, yeah, immediately after the interview, I noted down a really valuable point that Glenn made, which relates, she builds on what you were just saying. He said it in the context of what we see people sharing on LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever. And he said that people are always talking and referencing the new clients they've taken on, but they don't tell you about the ones that they've lost or sacked or the new ones that didn't stay very long. And I thought that was really worth pulling out. And in terms of stopping acting for difficult clients and building on the point you just made, Philippa, the fact that he, every 12 to 18 months, he looks through his client list now to identify his favourite clients and those that are the most profitable. He distinguishes them from the average clients and the problematic ones. And I think what you're saying is that a number of those smaller clients, if they weren't going to survive, the amount of time that they were taking and not able to pay for, there's a limit, both during the pandemic, there's limits to how charitable accountants could be. And now we're through all that, thank goodness. There's an important lesson there for accountants to think about whether or not they really want to be spending time with those smaller clients who can't afford to pay them for the advice that they need. And as Glenn said, having pivotal conversations to clean things up and to decide whether or not to stick with those clients or not. And something else he said that also reflects a point that often comes up in meetings of the Sole Practice Club that I run, and that is that accountants have far more credibility when clients believe that you're running your own practice the way you're encouraging clients to run their business. Just helping people digging into their business, understanding their business, the business behind the numbers, giving them a little bit more without having to put in loads of effort. Is really helpful as long as they recognize that you're running your practice efficiently and effectively. And the point I frequently make is that accountants, you can afford to be commercial in the way that you charge your fees and the payment terms you impose, because you'd be encouraging your clients to do the same things. And wouldn't it be hypocritical if you're encouraging them to do things that you're not doing? And then finally, sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
You build on that. No, okay. All right. So the final thing he said, which is just so apposite, is that, and it comes up again in one of our other interviews that I'll reference later. He said, perfection is the enemy of action. And a lot of people hold off taking action because they want to be perfect, and they want the results to be perfect. And it's better to take action and do something and then maybe tweak it as you go along. And I think that's such an important lesson. It's one I regularly reference with my clients as well.
Yeah, and I think that idea of being courageous and also being a business yourself and having those difficult conversations. And I know he referred to kind of the red, amber, green kind of traffic light system, and he was talking about his clients, but actually recognizing that somebody was a red and actually in trouble and in difficulty, and having that conversation, that realistic conversation, saying, actually, we probably need to look at the future here and what is really going on. And I think a lot of us, not just accountants, fear that sort of conversation. But I think also, I mean, if you have your own accountant, you want them to be talking to you like that. You want them to have that difficult conversation, because actually it may be that after that conversation something else can happen. There is a discussion that creates that breakthrough. So it's being courageous.
So courageous, and it shouldn't, frankly, it shouldn't take courage to give advice to clients and tell them what they need to do. There's this bizarre historic view that the client is always right. But actually the origin of that quote is the client is always right in matters of taste. The accountant is generally right as regards giving decent accountancy and tax advice, and shouldn't be afraid of doing that, because, as you say, speaking as a client yourself, you want your accountant to tell you what you need to do and what you can do and what you can't do. Well, most decent clients do. We should move on, shouldn't we?
Most definitely, yes.
Yeah. Episode 15 featured Mitch Hahn, who's the chief exec of Nordens. This is a very different discussion to the usual, because Nordens, with 60 odd people, is a relatively larger firm compared to most of our other smaller interviewees. But we were still able to focus the interview on key elements that provided learning points for our listeners. And one of the key points here repeated something we discussed regarding Glenn, and that is that Mitch admitted he used to spend a lot of time procrastinating before he started to speed up his decision making. making, later realizing that if he made the wrong call, he'll admit that, but not doing anything is really the best option.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And one of the things that struck me, I mean, Mitch, I think, is an amazing character and personality, and he's just got a brain that's always on. I mean, he's always innovating, and he was talking very much about how they're tackling neurodiversity and how the whole business is going through some training at the moment to recognize that and to be able to support certain clients. And that is, I think, really, really best practice. But what I loved about Mitch generally is that he admitted, like quite a few people, that he never intended to be an accountant. In fact, character and personality wise, it didn't necessarily suit him that well, but he did fall into it. And what he realized was that actually it's all about business. It's a fundamental part of business. And that is how he works within the firm. That's how he works with business development, which is his kind of bag. And that's how he talks to prospects and clients. It's very much business first and then talking about the finances second. And that's how you have that
Absolutely.
better, richer conversation, because he's not a numbers person necessarily. He's a let's do business and find out about who you are. And again, I think that's what really marks him out and the firm out, because they are very, very human and really passionate about business as well.
Absolutely. And Mitch is also a very humble leader. He talked about building a team that are better than he is. And for smaller practices, and our other interviewees and listeners, I'd suggest that approach can also involve recognizing when to engage external support, whether that's branding and marketing, like Philippa provides to accountants, an external experienced mentor, modesty forbids, and also knowing when to talk with a tax expert, such as those available through findataxadvisor.online, which I chair, I admit, the Tax Advice Network.
Very good, very good. So who have we got next? I think we're going to be talking about Graham Tennick, aren't we, of Tennick Accountants?
That's right,
and
episode 16. Go on.
Exactly. And I've known of Graham for quite a long time, but it was when I listened to him talking so passionately on the Six Figure Bookkeeper webinar that I thought we absolutely have to have him on. And what I really love about Graham is he's from the north, so he's he talks direct, and the passion comes through, and he calls a spade, and so he should. But he's taken kind of his experience from his father, who was very much, he had his own business, but I think was it on tractors or diggers or something like that? I can't remember, but it was very much, a trade. And so Graham in particular, I think, it is again very much a business first person. He understands business. He's been at the coal face, and he knows those sort of conversations to have. And that's really one of the things that again marks him out as a really fantastic leader, because he drives that business conversation and he's not afraid to have that conversation, which I think again a lot of people are. I think there's a recurring theme here on this review podcast, but I think it's really, really important because we've got very different personalities. We've got Glenn, who I think is direct and authentic, but quiet. I think we've then got Mitch, as you said, who's very humble, but he's also kind of full of energy and innovation and new ideas. And then we've got Graham, who is just real maverick and sort of really believes in the power of business. And I think really how he fell into accounting is quite an interesting conversation too.
Yeah, you're right. Although I'm not sure Graham would take kindly to being described as a maverick.
I don't know.
He's distinct, I agree, in a really positive way. And again, quite humble. I remember he sat next to me at an accountancy convention conference last year. He was as thrilled to be sitting next to me as I was to be sitting next to him. which was always very touching. He also told us that he thinks that the client accountant relationship is broken, in terms that accountants are able to provide a much wider range of services than their clients recognise, because the accountants aren't very good at telling clients what they can do and helping clients to appreciate that there is more available than has historically been provided. And it's all too easy to assume that clients know what they want, when the chances are they've got no idea what you could be doing for them beyond the basics.
Yeah, and I mean, I would imagine that is something. I mean, I know that a lot of accountants and people generally in the space um, kind of know this to be true and are working hard to educate their clients to what they can actually do. And I think that disconnect really is potentially in the brain and the mindset of the client, rather than any kind of lack of energy or passion from the accounting side of things. There is that educational piece that I think hasn't happened, or needs to happen.
Very much so. It's something I'll be addressing in my upcoming talk at Accountex on the future demands different accountants to those of yesterday. And I'll admit that whilst I won't be name checking any of our interviewees, I very much have in mind some of those that I've spoken to who are already operating close to the way that will enable them to succeed in the future, greater than the accountants of yesterday, if you like, focused only on sort of recurring compliance services and not helping their clients to engage more with them. And also recognizing that, of course, we can't do that with all clients. And as I've often said to my mentoring clients, accountants, if you don't think any of your existing clients want anything more than compliance services, then you have a choice. Either you look to take on far more clients like that with, sadly, progressively falling fees for that recurring work, or you have to look at securing more clients who are a little bit bigger and have more funds and are able to pay you for that wider range of services. And I would imagine in a number of cases, they would be dramatically helped by engaging your services on the branding and marketing side of things, Philippa.
Oh, that's very good. Lovely segue. Yeah, I mean, I think the future of accounting, there's a lot of conversation around AI and tech, and rightly so. But as you've said, the 5 people that we have spoken to recently are very much advocates for the human side as well, and the two have to go together. And I was looking up while you were talking. I've got my version of copy of The Human Firm here, by Will Farnell, which obviously plays a massive part there. You cannot have the future-facing AI tech side of things without that relationship and that understanding that, the accounting firm is a business as well as the client, and everybody can learn from everybody else. So that's great stuff. So who are we going to be talking about next? I think, is it Pavan
It was,
Kirpalani
yeah, episode 17. He was very honest about how he struggled initially, knew he couldn't wholly blame the pandemic and lockdown on his slow progress. He was also the first interviewee to take an extract from our podcast video with him and to put it out on his own social media.
Yeah, I mean, that was brilliant, and it was even set up and beautifully filmed, wasn't it? I mean, it really
Yeah,
was. It was very classy, so hats off to him. What was really interesting is, obviously, before the session, I didn't really know him at all well. But afterwards, we had Lorraine Ellison, who's also been a guest of the podcast, who referred to him as a brave as a brave accountant who was doing amazing things. And I think those are really incredible words for somebody. But I think he is very brave, and by brave I mean he has conversations with clients. That is his primary goal. And as he was saying to both you and I, that he doesn't see that as a waste of time or kind of losing value. He actually thinks that that is really, really important. It's really important, even if at the beginning you're working really hard to get your client on board and to get them to understand. It's actually value that comes through later on as a result of that. So he was talking to us about how he'll get on a Zoom with a client and spend time talking to them face to face. And I think that does take courage, especially if you're a numbers person. So that was one of the things that really stood out for me about him.
Well, and I'd to build on that as well. I'm sure that he has conversations with prospective clients where he explains that that is part of the service that he provides. It's not just a question of taking their raw data, turning it into accounts and tax returns and sending them out, like one might say accountants of yesterday all too often did. So he gave an example of helping clients to understand the director's loan accounts and explaining the key numbers in their accounts. And the way that his clients value and appreciate that. And of course, for an accountant who says they've got clients who won't appreciate it, fine. But you can choose who your clients are by discussing with them the type of service you like to provide and look to provide, and that you charge for appropriately. Some clients will like that, some won't. And he freely admitted, the age-old story of taking on anyone and everyone initially when he was looking to build the practice, and that he's refined his client base since then. And I, particularly as he started with a lack of focus and he had limited experience of himself working in a small practice. And although he's not a member of my sole practice club, it sounded very much as if he'd received a lot of support from something similar. And if you know what it was, don't mention it, because let's stick with my sole practice club.
Exactly. And I think, I think that was a reference back to the COVID period, wasn't it? Where everybody just needed a helping hand. And again, Lorraine managed to bring wine into that meeting. So she's a particular hero of mine. But I think one of the other things that Pavan said as well was that it's just him and his wife. And I think he was very clear about that, wasn't he? And also
Yeah,
how, they really are a strong couple. And they sort of do different things. So Pavan is really very good at the conversation, about helping, about the service. And then his wife is very good at sort of grounding him. And also he said that she's actually a better accountant than he is. And she's very
absolutely
strong with the
right.
numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And oh God, I really hope it's not sexist to say that how many strong women I know who are driving their husbands or partners in a way that some blokes may not otherwise be able to do themselves. In fact, I thought it was interesting because, again, reflecting back on those conversations, our fifth guest in episode 18 was Jonathan Ford,
Yeah.
who was made a big point of the fact that, along with his wife, runs Writers Tax, chartered accountancy firm, specialising in helping authors, script writers, and other professional writers with their tax and accounting needs. And Jonathan said much the same as regards the powerhouse and strength that his wife brings to the practice beyond what he does, and they work well together. It's not his practice with her working alongside. This is a true partnership.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like, and that's a theme as well. Obviously, the people that we've had in as guests have been fine about talking on a podcast and talking live, but what we see is there's a person who is very strong on the numbers, and then somebody else who actually, when it comes to communication, such as Jonathan and Pavan, they're really good at that, and they're really good at hand holding their clients. One of the things about Jonathan, and I'm sure you can talk about this in more detail, about this no growth kind of strategy that they have, which I think is wonderful, because some people can say that's not a strategy. But actually, from his perspective and his wife's perspective, it absolutely is, because that strategy is, we will have a certain number of clients who absolutely tick the box for who we are. And they have a background in media, I think it is. And so a lot of their clients are copywriters and all that good stuff. But they have absolutely used the niche kind of idea to fundamentally drive their type of business. And that is a great example of it working well, where actually they tailor everything that they do around that particular business, and they're talking to the right people. They contextually really understand those clients as well, which is, I think, niching is all about understanding your own experiences and understanding your own background and thinking, what else can I bring to the party? So again, we spoke about Graham. He's had a lot of experience around his father's business, so he understands business, and that's why he sort of drives business first. And here with Jonathan and his wife, it's all about, we understand this sector, we understand this space, and we're going to be able to drive that value. And if you remember, Mark, they also have this waiting list that people are very happy to sit on for over a year, he said, which I think
Yeah,
is really
I'm not sure how happy people are, but they are willing to be on his waiting list. And I thought, two related points here. The first one is that he'd previously run a larger practice and decided
yes.
that he didn't want to be doing that anymore. He wanted to practice in his early 50s, I think mid 50s, and a few years ago they decided they'd just run a practice, just the two of them. And in the context of this, their strategy for no growth in client base, um, I referenced the fact that I first became aware of the practice when I was judging the Accounting Excellence Awards a couple of years ago. And one of the questions we all, the judges ask and look to see is evidence of a strategy. And sadly, so many entries talk about hopes and dreams, but don't talk about the strategy and how they're going to achieve them. And what Jonathan and his wife's entry had done was they set out a very clear strategy of increasing turnover without dramatically increasing staff numbers. They're based at home. It's just the two of them. And Jonathan was very open with us and told us that they are already turning over more than £400,000 a year. How much growth do they need? They don't want to have staffing issues. They don't want an office. So obviously, they're not going to be looking to grow. But what they are doing is they run a waiting list. And as they become more efficient, as clients sell up, retire, move on, or whatever, so they can take on more clients from their waiting list, paying decent fees. And that's a great strategy. Nothing wrong with that at all.
I mean, strategy is obviously my game around brand, and that for me is less about the design and the logo, or that's an outcome or a solution. But actually, for me, it's all about, who are you as a business? What do you want, and what do you offer your clients that's different? How can you position yourself in a growing and a competitive market? But what I loved, and I think we spoke about this off air actually, Mark, was that strategy of not growing. Yes, it's a strategy, but obviously it comes with a downside as well, which they fully acknowledged and knew about and had taken into account, is that it's more difficult to go on holiday because it's just them. There is nobody else to carry the can. But from their perspective, they don't see that they're going to change that. They don't see that in the short term that's going to change. They've decided that that's how it's going to run. That's what they're going to do with the practice. And I guess from a sales perspective, at the end of the day, there will obviously be implications there as well, which you, I'm sure, can talk about a lot in your Soul Practice Club.
Yeah, I think that's right. And essentially, you said that they can go away for a week, but a fortnight or longer is out of the
Yeah,
question. Which I understand, and that's the cost of their choice, but it's a
yeah,
choice that works for them in every other respect. And
exactly.
frankly, I can't say I blame them making that choice. Well, where's the time gone?
I know.
That's a half hour up. We'll
It's
obviously we'll
amazing.
plan
And it was
another
pretty
review.
quiet over on your side as well. It was not too bad
Well, I
at
was
all.
good. I made judicious use of the mute button where I could. We will, of course, plan another review session in the next month or so. For now, though, dear listener, do please get in touch with Philippa or myself if you've been running your own practice for a good few years and you have a story that you're happy to share.
Yeah, and of course, you'll all find the interviews and episodes we've mentioned on LinkedIn, on Spotify and Apple, and even YouTube if you want to see faces.
Yeah,
If we
and
feel you just
LinkedIn. Oh yes,
and
sorry,
LinkedIn,
you said that.
yes, yes, yeah,
You
yeah,
said
yeah.
that.
Please review us, and if 5-star only, obviously, but
Yeah.
on Apple Podcasts, that would be really lovely to help us reach an even wider audience. Obviously, let us have feedback too. I think we've been getting quite a lot of love actually, Mark, which is
We
absolutely
we
fantastic.
we do, and I'll actually reciprocate here because one of our guests, Claire Owen Jones, has her own podcast, which she modestly didn't mention. But in the context of niching, I was listening to it yesterday. It's called Bad Business, and she talks about the business lessons or the bad business lessons from TV and film shows that she enjoyed. And one I listened to this morning is where she's talking about the bad business lessons about niching from the film Kinky Boots, which is a favourite of mine as well. And it's a delightful interview. So I highly recommend Bad
Brilliant.
Business that she's doing there. But before we finish, we should share our contact details in the traditional way. Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you and Insight 101?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn, where we are now, live.
Yeah,
And if you'd like to book a call, the best way is to go to my website, which is www.insight101.co.uk. Alternatively, come and find us at Accountex, because both you and
yeah.
I will be talking on the 15th of May. Is it 1:00, Mark, I think?
It is 1:00, 1:00
Okay.
on Wednesday the 15th. We've got the panel session with the title.
Help! I'm an introvert and I'm scared of marketing. And that has got quite a
Yeah,
lot of traction already. So we're
it
looking
has.
forward to that.
You've been building that up really well. And on Thursday at lunchtime at 1:00 in the Orbit Theatre, I'll be presenting my new keynote talk. The future demands different accountants to those of yesterday.
Yep.
Um,
So let's hear a little bit more about your Soul Practice Club and how people can find out more about that. And then we're done, I think.
Yeah, thanks. Soul Practice Club is for sole practitioners, by which I mean people running their own practices where they're the decision maker. Doesn't matter if they have colleagues, staff, outsourcing, or contractors, or if they're working entirely by themselves. Members seem to love it. It's full details on my website, www.bookmarklee.co.uk. Normally at this stage, I brandish a bookmark because online everywhere I'm Bookmark Lee. Just realised I don't have one to hand, standing where I am at the Institute. My mistake. And obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, where you'll find me, Mark Lee, FCA, to distinguish me from the other 5,000 odd people with the same name there.
Oh, there's only one you, though, Mark. There's only one you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So that's it. We're done. That's it. Another review session done, dusted, and we're looking forward to our next guest, who will be here shortly in the next
Yeah,
couple of weeks.
next. That's right. Back to normal then. So for now, many thanks, Philippa, for making this happen. Thank you to my Institute hosts who didn't even know I was here. Until next time on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, or anywhere that we might meet online or in real life. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you.